I'm not bound by that instrument. I'm bound by that instrument only under Article 6, Section 1, Clause 3, my oath to that instrument, right? As a servant of the people. That's what binds me to that document. And that document limits the power of government. It doesn't limit the power of the individual. The individual is free. And that takes us to week 18. Federalist 45, the alleged dangers from the powers of the Union to the state governments, because this was a big argument of the Anti-Federalists. Well, wait a minute. You're taking power away from the state, and they're conferring some of that power on the federal government. We don't like that idea. Right? Well, Madison in 45 is very clear where the power of the federal government is, and it's not in the state. And it says that these powers delegated to the federal government by this Constitution are war, peace, negotiation, and foreign commerce. That's it. Those are the only 4 powers delegated by the states to the federal government. So it wasn't given to the federal government. It's not theirs to keep forever. It was delegated to them. So their power is only at the seacoast, 20 miles out, forts, ports, armories, and federal territory. Now, you all know about federal forests, right? And Bureau of Land Management. Explain to me how the federal government can own a forest that transcends 2 sovereign state boundaries, and somehow the federal government has power there. When in Article 1, Section 8, clauses 1 through 18, it says exactly, actually clause 18, says exactly what property the federal government can own, and the only places that they are supreme. Think about that. Week 19, Federalist Paper 49. Method of guarding against the encroachments of any one department of government by appealing to the people through a convention. This talks about the 5th article of the Constitution, and we'll get into that. There's pros and cons on both sides of that, and we'll discuss that. Then Federalist 51, the structure of government must furnish the proper checks and balances between the different departments. This was published on Friday, February 8th, 1788. This is very important. This is the separations of power. One of the things that Madison talks about in 51 is he said, if men were angels, we would need no government. And if government was controlled by angels, we'd need no constitution. But since neither is true, hello, this is why we need this document. Now we have to remember that the word constitution is an ancient word for the word contract. Now anybody here write contracts or deal with contracts, contract law? Okay, contract law we've had since the Magna Carta 1215. And that is, there has to be, the contract produces something, and there has to be parties to the contract, right? 2 or more parties to the contract. So I ask people all the time, the Constitution, what's it a contract between? They always go, well, the state and the federal government. Really? Because it was the Constitution that created 3 branches of federal government. So how could they be a party to something that they didn't even exist until the contract was ratified? Does that make any sense to anybody? So who were the parties to the contract? The people of the several states. The product of the contract was 3 branches of federal government. So this brings me around to another dilemma I have all the time when people say, well, the Supreme Court said this. Well, who in the world made them the final arbiter of what is and isn't constitutional? How is it that 1/3 of the product of a contract gets to decide the provisions of a contract? Where else in contract law has that ever been? It's not. And in contract law, if there's a dispute in the contract, we have to go back to the original intent of the article in the contract. See, we've all been taught that the legislature makes the law, right? And the executive enforces the law. What have we always been told about the judicial? They interpret the law, right? Nope, not in Article 6, Section 1, Clause 3. They take an oath to uphold, support, and defend the law. Not interpret it, because 85 Federalist Papers have already interpreted every part of that contract. If they have a question about that contract, they are supposed to go back to the original intent and meaning of each and every article, section, and clause. They are not the final arbiters of what is and isn't constitutional. We the people are. Does anybody know what the highest authority in the United States is? Anybody?
We the people.
We the people. But what group, when those people come together, is the highest authority? Jury. Jury. A grand jury and a criminal jury is the highest authority, right? You can kill your wife, kill her boyfriend, and escape in a Bronco, and if the jury says not guilty, there's nothing that even a judge can do about it, right? And there's a reason for that. The government should not have, our governmental servants should not have the power to decide life and death. Let there be light. Should not be able to decide life or death. It's a jury, a grand jury, right? Nowhere in the Constitution is the grand jury given to any branch of government. Think about that. It's not in Article 1, it's not in Article 2, it's not in Article 3. But in the 5th article of the Bill of Rights, it says that anybody that's going to be charged with an infamous crime or a capital crime must be indicted by a grand jury. Now, does anybody know what an infamous crime is? It's what we call today a felony. Now, in the state of Michigan, we don't have grand juries. One person gets to decide whether you should be charged with a felony. We've got that going on in Hillsdale right now. We just arrested a woman because she ran against the chair of the county board, and this is the first time he's ever had to print signs, and they went to the health department, pulled her records, even her medical records, and they put them out online and trashed her, and so she said something bad to the wife of her opponent, and they now have arrested her for a felony. Think about that. Free speech. Political speech. Political speech has the highest privilege in the First Amendment. The highest. And we are now one person who his budget is dependent on the person that she said this about is now prosecuting her for a felony. Do you see why it's the people, the grand jury, that needs to come together to decide that? It shouldn't be left up to a government actor. It needs to be the people. So we'll get into that a little bit. So you can see how far we've drifted from the Constitution. And the Constitution is the solution to our problems. That brings us around to week 21. The bounty payments for cod fisheries debate, Madison, February 6, 1792. I guarantee you, when you read that, you're going to think this guy was better than Nostradamus. Absolutely better. He must have had a crystal ball because he predicted where we're at right now. Then we're going to get to week 22, which is the Constitution and Overview. This is when when we get done with this class, you're going to be able to tell everybody, yes, I've read the Constitution all the way through. I've read the Declaration of Independence all the way through. And I've read all of the 5 genealogical documents from beginning to end. You're going to be able to say that. And not only that, when you're done with this class, I guarantee you're going to think about the founding and our documents different. And you're going to be able to look and find the things that you're questioning. And you'll be able to make up your own mind through critical thinking. Isn't that a great thing? I used to teach at a college. They got mad at me because they wanted me to teach the students what to think. And I said, I will not. I will teach them how to think. I will not teach them what to think. I don't work there anymore. Then we're going to look at week 23, which is the Constitution is the Solution, the Dangers of Democracy through the John Birch Society. This is a series of 6 videos that we're going to watch. And they will kind of overshadow everything we've talked about, but it'll give you some very specific things. You're going to learn about neoconservatism. You're going to learn why the Democrat Party and the Republican Party look the same. Why they're the same. Because you've got one side that's practicing Marxism, which is National Socialism, and you've got another side that's practicing Trotskyism, which is International Socialism. Both of them communism. Both. And you're going to find out how that happened in the early 70s and what's truly going on. And you're going to see what the fight is right now going on within the party structures and within your government right now. You'll be able to identify it. And I'll tell you what, one of the guys that's been in I happen to be, was the parliamentarian for the Hillsdale County Republican Party. I go out and I talk to people all the time. I hate being in an echo chamber. So I talk to Democrats all the time. But they don't know I'm a Republican. And we talk, and by golly, we agree on so much stuff. It's scary. And then they find out I'm the parliamentarian for the Hillsdale County Republican Party. They go, "What? You're a Republican?" "Yeah, a constitutional one." And they go, "Well, we agree on so much." "Yeah." That's why it says, "We the people." We the people. We are supposed to keep our government in check. We the people. We've been horrible bosses for too long. They use the news media as propaganda against us. What has happened, we were supposed to have 3 separate branches of government, but they have come together, coalesced into one, because they are all operating on power. And what they have done is used one of the oldest tactics in the world, and that's to divide and conquer. The only thing that keeps this country together is we, the people. And I'm here to tell you, get out of your echo chamber and start getting out there and talking to people. And you're going to find out that they're not the icky people you thought they were. Here's the problem. Democrats are taught to hate Republicans because they think we're all Cheney. They think we're all Bush. They think we're all Romney. They all think we're McCain. I can't stand any of those people because none of them understood what the Constitution was. Bush himself gave a speech of the great democracy America. Holy cow! You were the president and you think we're a democracy. That's scary. Now Republicans are taught to hate Democrats because they must all be Nancy Pelosi or Schumer or AOC or Tlaib, right? No, when you get out there and talk to the Democrat on the street, they don't like them people either. It's a ruse. We're all being fed propaganda so that we're separate. Because if we're separated, the government has power. When we come together as we the people, we are the government. And we will turn the ship around. And that's their greatest fear. So you got to get out of your echo chamber. Now, are there going to be people that are extreme on one side or the other? Yes, there are. In fact, there's people that I talk to that are Republicans, and when we get to talking, they go, "Oh, I can't even be around you." Yeah, probably because you're practicing communism. And I'll call you out on it every time. So, don't be afraid to get out of your echo chamber. And once you understand this, you're going to find it so much easier to carry on a conversation with no matter who it is on the street you meet. And that's why this is important. So those 6 videos we're going to go through, and that'll take us through to week 28. Now, if you go to the next document in that packet that I gave you, and I'm sorry, did you guys get a packet when you came in? Okay. So the next one is self-evident truths. There's 10 self-evident truths, and we're going to keep coming back to these self-evident truths through this whole class. And that is, if you look at the first one, the first basic truth, I already highlighted that earlier. Man is born of God, operates under the pleasure of God, and because of that he has rights, and those rights are protected by the common law and the Constitution. Corporations are born of government. They operate under the pleasure of government, and thereby they have privileges, and those privileges are protected by statutes and the Uniform Commercial Code. That is key. That is the starting point to understanding all of this law. Because remember, we're no longer subjects under the king. We're subjects under the law. Because without law, there can be no liberty. Right? Even the children of Israel understood that. So when we come down further, number one. Number one, all law comes from God. That's the first thing. All law comes from God. Period. All natural law. How does God control His children? With natural law, right? We all experience certain things. We do bad things. We live horrible lifestyles. We pay for it in some way, don't we? We do. It's natural law. That's how God controls His children, through natural law. Just as government is supposed to control their children, corporations, through statute and Uniform Commercial Code. The problem is, in today's modern politics, our government servants have jumped into bed with the corporations. See, me as the individual, I have individual rights. Anybody remember the case of the baker in Oregon that wouldn't bake the cake for the gay couple? I went to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court said he had an individual religious right. All my Christian friends were going. I said, man, they got it wrong. How could you say that? Because he got it wrong. They got it wrong. When you give up operating under the pleasure of God for the protections that government gives and privileges as a corporation, you no longer have the individual right of religion. See, these rights are individual rights. They're not corporate rights, because corporations don't have rights. They have privileges. And in Michigan, is so overregulated. My dad built houses, I built houses, my brother built houses. I couldn't build a house for somebody without becoming a corporation and working either under a DBA, LLC, or a S Corp or a C Corp. Because they made that illegal. Well, why? Because government wants to control everything I do. I can't operate as John Rutan, the individual, because if I did, I have all these individual rights. I have the right to contract with anybody for anything. And if I do something bad and I get sued, then I could lose my house. I could lose my savings. I could lose my children's college education. But I'm operating under the pleasure of God, under the faith in God, that if He can feed the sparrow, He can feed me. But if I'm afraid of that, I can become a corporation. Corporations are umbrellas over companies, so that if I do something bad, the only thing they can take is what's in the company. I still keep all my stuff. So I'm trusting under the pleasure of government, not under the pleasure of God. Do you see how we've overregulated things so that you can't have your individual right and trust in God? So, did they get that decision right? No. Because that baker was operating as a corporation. When he did that, he was no longer operating under the pleasure of God, but under the pleasure of government. And if government says, we are going to protect your wealth, but you have to follow these rules, then guess what? You have to follow those rules. Just like God says, if you're going to live under my word and have these liberties, you have to live under my rules. Right? Is that such a hard concept to understand? But it's a concept that we've lost the meaning of in the John Dewey model of public school. because we need to be taught how to be good slaves to the government, rather than the government, we the people. This is why they're dividing and conquering, and this is why they've coalesced and no longer separate. It's our job to rectify it. It's nobody else's. One of the most important sentences I ever learned in the military. It's 10 words, and each word is only 2 letters long. It's the most important sentence I ever learned. I was an infantry soldier. And that is, if it is to be, it is up to me. The problem with the government isn't your fault. The problem with the government is my fault. The problem with my children not understanding this isn't your fault, it's my fault. Who else is a baby boomer in here? I'm the last of the baby boomers. We screwed this thing up bad. We screwed it up bad. And I can't, with any good conscience, hand this pile of steaming crap off to my children. So I'm going to do whatever I have to do to fix it. This is why I dedicate my life to going around, and I do this as ministry to go around and teach this. I don't charge, ever have I charged. Because knowledge is the first key to changing this. If we don't understand the principles and we don't understand the founding of this country and the history that it took, there's no way that we can be the true masters of the law and do what's right. Number 3, the word constitution is an ancient word that means contract in today's language. So every time we start talking about the Constitution and we start looking at this, we have to understand it as a contract. That's why people say, oh, well, anybody ever heard, when I ask people, I say, what kind of government are we? I get democracy all the time. I want to throw up. But the other bad one I get is, well, I got this from a Hillsdale College student. Graduated from Hillsdale College, and she happens to be married to somebody in government. And I was talking to her, and I said, well, what kind of government do we have? She said, we've got a democratic republic. And I laughed out loud. I thought she was kidding with me. And I realized I hurt her feelings. I'm like, how can you have an up-down? You can't. It's an oxymoron in terms. You can't have a democratic republic. See, a lot of people think that we're democratic because we vote. No, voting is not a hallmark of a democracy. Mob rule is hallmark of a democracy. Okay, anybody ever seen a riot? Do you think in a riot they all get together before the riot and they go, okay, hands up. Who's for looting? Missed it by 1. Okay, who's for burning buildings down? Oh, we got that one. We're going to do that one. That's no, democracy is mob rule. In a riot, when the mob goes and the majority goes towards something and does it, that's the rule of the mob. Those that are in the minority of the mob get crushed. That's why democracies are horrible forms of government for anybody in any minority. Whether it's a religious minority, an economic minority, an ethnic minority, it doesn't matter. A business minority, it doesn't matter. Democracies crush minorities. Republics take care of the masses and protect minorities. That's what republics do because we're under the law. If you can get 51% of the people to vote to take your children are gone in a democracy. In a republic, they can't because you have due process. They can't just take it. Even in a jury, it's not it's not 51%, it's 100%. It has to be a unanimous verdict, even in a jury. So we are not a democracy because we vote. We vote because it says we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they're endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. And here comes the important part, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just power from the consent of the governed, We vote to test the consent of the governed. We are not a democracy because we vote. And I get this all the time. Anybody watch Tucker Carlson? I want to throw up every time he says democracy or Democrat. Dude, get a clue. Come to one of my classes. It's free. We vote to test the consent of the governed. We are not a democracy because we vote. So that's a huge misconception. Liberty is created by freedom coupled with morality. Remember, John Adams said, this Constitution is only meant for a moral and religious people. It's wholly inadequate for any other. This is why during the 20th century with the progressive movement, we've seen this destruction to the family, destruction to morality. It's horrible. It's horrible what we've done. And we sit around and think that we're doing a great thing. We're not. We're not. You realize Michigan went from 7 prisons to 58 prisons in a 20-year period, and we still had them overcrowded. You know, if you build it, they will come. You've heard that, right?
Yeah.
This is why it scares me every time the sheriff in my county goes, we need a bigger jail. No, you need a smaller one, dude, because you're locking up too many of our people for the stupidest reasons. All it's doing is destroying families. We've watched it in Detroit all these years. All we're doing is taking fathers out of the family because the best way to bring about atheism and democracy and communism is to destroy the family unit. That's the quickest way. And we've been destroying the family unit over and over and over by an out-of-control government that'll arrest people for the stupidest thing. Oh, you didn't have insurance on your vehicle? You're 1 day over. Well, that's an arrestable offense. Really? Is that a smart thing to do? Okay, Father, you lost your job and you missed your child care payment, so we're going to throw you in jail. Now, how did that help the child?
Debtor's prison.
And how did that help the father? How did that help the mother? Right? Because now we've put some people on the dole. Who's got to pay for that? Everybody else that's working. You haven't done anything good. Let me tell you something. Poverty doesn't create crime. Never has. If that was the case during the Great Depression, we should have seen the greatest crime wave ever. And we didn't, did we? Poverty does not create crime. Idle hands is the devil's workshop. When we don't do things to keep good jobs, when we do things, when we pay farmers to not produce. I'm sorry, who's farmers in here? Yeah, okay. When we pay farmers not to produce, that's called corporate welfare. That's wrong. When we do those things. It destroys the economy. When we do Keynesian economics, it destroys the economy. And when we take
man's character.
That's right. And when we take that away and cause idle hands, and then we can't understand why there's crime. The inner city, I know everybody in the country likes to point their finger at the inner city and go, "What's the problem?" No. Detroit was a vibrant city at one time. Beautiful. Lots of jobs. Families staying together, staying married. But then we got rid of the jobs, and we turned it into a crap hole. And we started taking fathers out of the family. And then what happened? The kids would get together and form gangs because they were yearning for that family unit that was now destroyed by corporate America. By our government getting in bed with corporations. And then we want to go, well, we need to build 58 prisons. No, you need to stay out of people's lives. And we, the government, we, the people, have got to get this back